Is Elite Dangerous a flight simulator? See, I've been a fanatic of simulation games for a very long time, ever since I was a kid. And playing Elite gives me a feeling of flying in space. Being able to fly without assist makes even space flight feel more real. And I get to use a lot of flying techniques that I've developed over the years by playing other flight sims. And even though it's not, scientifically accurate, it's set far into the future makes me imagine what it could look like. But does the accuracy matter? Is Elite Dangerous a flight simulator? Let's discuss. In short, I believe Elite Dangerous is a fantasy space flight simulator. And there's many similarities to traditional flight sims with some aspects of spaceflight, but it approaches spaceflight from more of a science fiction point of view. So how does it compare to, say, traditional flight sims regarding, like, say, gameplay and flight characteristics, and what really is a flight simulator? Well, a simple flight simulator consists of multiple displays, control devices, audio system for communication, and some sort of a computer system to process those control inputs and to record the flight data. You've got games such as Microsoft Flight Simulator and X-Plane, just for simple examples. The flight sims give you a feeling of actually flying an aircraft, or in our case, a spacecraft. They can be played with a HOTAS, including pedals. They immerse you, dare I say it, by using checklists and procedures. It's an environment that gives you a sense of being present in the action. So, in that case, I would consider Elite Dangerous to be a flight simulator. It's not a flight simulator based in an atmosphere, but it feels like a flight simulator. But what about spaceflight's physics? That's difficult. We don't really have much to go on. We've only begun traveling in space in the last few decades. The closest representation I can think of for a game of spaceflight would be, say, Kerbal Space Program, or maybe Space Engineer to a degree. The challenge in those types of games is pretty much limited to landing and taking off, performing orbital maneuvers or docking. And the goal is to master a real or a realistic spacecraft using celestial mechanics and astronautics. So in that case, I would say that Elite Dangerous is not a flight simulator. In fact, it's far from it. But what about spaceflight and science fiction? How does that look? Well, science fiction uses our known flight mechanics and physics that we understand today to simulate spaceflight. There are a few series out there, such as The Expanse and Battlestar Galactica, that give a little more of an accurate representation, but still are fictional based on unknown facts. So if you see, science fiction mostly is based far into the future, usually about a few hundred to a few thousand years, or a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. They simulate spaceflight that uses a mix of Newtonian physics and atmospheric flight. And the two are kind of indistinguishable from each other. In the case of, say, Battlestar and the Vipers, they fly more like fighter aircraft on Earth and have some sort of grounding in Newtonian physics with the ability to flip around very quickly and still moving in the same direction. But they have transparent cockpits and they have a 1 or 2 man crew. The technology must be far advanced in order to be able to fly a craft as a single pilot. There's also the case of G-forces and inertia. Flying at very high speeds, say warp, in Star Trek, without inertial dampeners, the crew would be pancakes on the walls whenever they would come to a full stop. So we have to invent inertial dampeners in order to nullify the effects of physics that we know today. Spacecraft in science fiction work the way that spacecraft needs to work in science fiction. Things are created to progress the story or to create a environment. So in that case, I would say Elite Dangerous really is a flight simulator as a fantasy space flight simulator, a science fiction space flight simulator. But is it based on our current knowledge of atmospheric and space flight. Elite, I don't think, accurately simulates flight based in space on our current knowledge. I think the closest that we have is, say, turning off flight assist and use of Newtonian physics there, but we have little experience of space flight in general. We don't have the ability to test atmospheric flight in Elite at this current moment. Perhaps sometime in the future we may, but we don't have a comparison to, say, Microsoft Flight Simulator, where we have controls such as wind and weather. The flight characteristics between the different ships in Elite is not really that much different. Yeah, the large ships do maneuver a little slow, but they pretty much fly just like the smaller ships. I wouldn't expect a ship the size of a football field to turn as quickly as, say, a ship the size of the space shuttle. And we have things that are based on theory, not facts, such as FTL and hyperspace. These things don't exist, so we have to invent them. The other things like speed and trajectory are not actually modeled based on our own experience. In space, things move much slower than what can be simulated. So in this case, I would say that Elite Dangerous isn't a flight simulator. It's created based on fantasy, but it's not based on reality. But is it a flight simulator based on futurism and fantasy and lore? Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are living in a simulated galaxy in the year 3306, 1300 years into the future. I would imagine that space flight would probably act more like atmospheric flight. If you think about it, the year 3306, we would probably have the technology and the computers, even without AI, to be able to create a feeling of atmospheric flight in space. The computers would be far more advanced. And the current modern day, if you think about it, current heavy aircraft use far advanced navigational computers that can take you from point A to point B without the pilot ever touching the controls, aside from taking off and sometimes landing. But even a large A380, which is the size or half the size of, say, our cutter, it lands itself for the most part. The pilot very rarely touches the controls. It's all automated. So if you think about it, auto dock in Elite Dangerous, I think would probably be a thing for something the size of a cutter, at least if you look at it from our modern era. And then we also have things that help us, visualize a horizon and sense of direction, orbit lines, and the moving lines in our HUD to simulate us moving forward. So I would say in that case, yeah, Elite Dangerous is absolutely a flight simulator. So what's the take of this? I seem to keep going back and forth in this argument. Is Elite Dangerous a flight simulator? If you're looking at it from a realistic point of view and trying to compare it to something like Flight Simulator by Microsoft or X-Plane, then no, it's not a flight simulator. But if you compare it to games like Everspace or X4 or any of those other games, I would say that it's pretty darn close to what a flight simulator in space would be. We don't know what it looks like yet. The future hasn't come yet. We can only go by theory and ideas and imagination. Accurate flight simulators are based on science fact. They're slow and calculated in maneuvering. But I think given a time period, I think it's as close to reality as a fictional storyteller can get about what the future may bring. So what do you think? Is Elite Dangerous a flight simulator? Let me know. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, hit the like button or leave a comment and let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to subscribe, go ahead. I've got more to come. Until then, peace. I'll see you in the black.